Let me now turn to Laura and ask whether we already have questions from the audience.
We can start with one comment and two questions. The comment is, the solution for social exclusion is social change which should be led and driven by the excluded ones, addressing the power imbalance. The first question is, how can we increase social trust between different groups in our increasingly diverse, heterogeneous, and global society, and with shocks posing an additional threat to uproot tensions and conflict between groups? And the second question is, do we think that gender issues can be solved without developing economies?
Thank you for the two questions from the audience. Who in the panel would like to take up the first question? How can trust between social groups be increased? Who would like to respond to this, Sherry? And that's all right. Okay.
It's a great question. I mean, one of the things that we found with CVA, the way that it's implemented, we actually have focus group with different groups within communities. We know that communities are not homogenous. And through having these focus group discussions and then bringing together those different communities, including various excluded communities, more marginalized communities like young women and girls, youth, various other axes of differentiation, we actually facilitate, it facilitates a wider conversation amongst these different groups that help to bring together, to build a dialogue and build a better cohesion between these groups. These are often groups that don't even communicate, even though they live in the same areas, they may not communicate with each other. So just by facilitating a community process that really brings in these different groups, it really does help to, it doesn't solve all the problems, let's be realistic, but it does start that conversation.
Thanks, Sherry. Thorad, I think you also wanted to comment on this.
Yeah, because of lack of time, I could not say many things, but joint paper by Joachim Braun and me gives in detail. Now, I think this is a very important question of trust. As I said earlier, that the affirmative action policy in favor of excluded group are met with a lot of resistance, and so there is a need to build up the trust. Now, what is the insight from economic theories? Gary Becker and Arrow, really who wrote the theories of economic discrimination, argued that the competitiveness of the market and perfect information will remove the discrimination and provide equal access to everybody. But the limitation of this theory have been now pointed out that no, decisions are taken for non-economic factor also, and the recent book by Kraloff, Identity Economics, point out that the non-economic factor, that is identity, norms, social categorization, does influence your economic outcome and the decision. And therefore, you require dual policies. And several countries in the world, they have used dual policies. One is the policy of providing access to the asset, increasing the productivity, developing general program for food security, health and employment poverty reduction. But these are applicable to all the poor. Poor belonging to the excluded communities face an additional constraint which the other do not face. And that is that they face exclusion and discrimination because of their identity. Therefore, many countries in the world who have the groups, excluded group, have developed affirmative action policy. And there are three components of that. One is the legal safeguard against discrimination. You have law against discrimination, so you can go to the take justice under that law. But second, law by itself cannot provide you access because of the past denial, and therefore the positive step to provide asset, education, employment, and share in the political institution is provided to the excluded group so that they can participate. And I think there are several countries in the world. I think the trust has to be built on the consideration and on the understanding that there were certain groups which were denied equal right in the past and continue to deny certain right in the present, if not all, some, and they need special policies, special protection. Then I think the trust will come forth. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing this. Esther also would like to comment.
Yeah, in traditional African societies, South, West, East, and North, you'll always hear one word that it's more mentioned with the Southern African language, the Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is practiced where everything that is done for everyone's good. And that is how African societies are organized. So there has never been anything in the traditional African society as lack of trust. And I think with the emergency of colonialism in most of African society, particularly where people were told you are better than the other, and of course with exclusion where people have been pushed to compete for space because they've been left out and they can't see what space exists there, that has actually stemmed up competition that we are now trying, and I think that's where that question is coming from. How do we trust each other because we have lost trust? And I think nobody knows better how to build trust and how to work together than grassroots women who are living in poor situation, who knows that the best of their times and the best of their survival depends on their social networks. And they have done many things to live together. And I think if you can study how HIV and AIDS pandemic in this continent has been stemmed down by home-based care providers who, when the hospitals could not cope with the amount of pressure, it's the grassroots women who walked in from house to house, looking at those who are bedridden. They're the people who are taking those ones who are sick to the hospital. They're the ones who are communicating with the health centers. But we do know that it has taken a lot of time. And I think what this tells us, and I think it's from that question, we cannot underrate the role of organizing. And we must know, and I think this is very important for development partners, organizing requires resources to get people to work together.
Okay, thank you for sharing this. Maybe we can turn to the second question from the audience. What's the relation between economic development in addressing gender issue? Maybe we could ask Neha or Myra to comment on this, and maybe you can take into account this resilience angle to this question. Neha?
Well, I think they go hand in hand, and it's really hard to divorce the two. And I'll give a simple example. So much of the developing world still is dependent on agriculture, and there are many smallholder women farmers in Africa, and we know that there's a big productivity differential between male and female farmers. And it's not because women are bad farmers, but it's because they have fewer access to resources, they have fewer access to extension services, fewer access to inputs. So I think both issues go hand in hand. We need to pay attention to gender as we go along in the economic development. So I think we can't divorce them.
Thank you, Neha. Myra?
Yeah, as Neha was saying, women have in African countries, and particularly there's just a study in Ethiopia and Uganda, that you give access, even when you give access actually to productive resources to women farmers, their productivity doesn't increase as well as that of male farmers. So there's an issue of access, but it's more than just access. And what happens is, I think, that women have different pressures, and also that services oftentimes are not designed with women and women clients in mind, and that includes agricultural extension services. But let me continue and explain a bit. As you have differentials in productivity between women and men when you give access to certain resources, also in terms of credit, a small grant or a small loan, men may use it better than women. And why? What's the question? What is happening? Are women, just not as good producers or entrepreneurs? It's a very interesting reason. When women get a windfall cash that they perceive as windfall, they have social pressures, and this goes back to social networks and social pressures. They have social pressures to give away even a little bit of that cash to relatives or community people around. So they don't invest all of it in the business. Men don't have this pressure. So men invest all of it in the business. So that's the beauty of giving women a cow, an asset. because clearly they cannot, take a bit away from the cow, cut a bit away, and then keep the cow. Maybe if you give women a dozen chickens, they may give away one chicken. So part of and these are design features that nudge women to keep the money that they get and that they perceive as windfall cash invested in the business. The other, and the very interesting other way to do it, aside from giving a physical asset, or giving, instead of cash, giving in kind, is mobile phones and the impact that mobile phones have on women's productivity and family welfare.